Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Lina Atallah. She's the co-founder and editor of the independent Egyptian media outlet Mada Masr. Thank you very much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Mark.
In late August, you published a story about corruption in the political party backing the authority. This created a backlash for you. You and three of your staffers were brought in for questioning by the police. You were charged with publishing false news. What is the current situation in this case?
We were brought for interrogations by the prosecutor, actually, and we are facing a number of charges, including publishing false news and misusing social media. These are common charges against journalists and also activists writing on social media or doing journalism. We don't know what is the fate of the case. It's in the hands of the judicial authorities right now. But we really hope that the charges are dropped. We really hope that to be able to do that kind of work, journalism, if there is an authority or a powerful party that experiences discontent from something that is published about them, their response should be expressed in responding to us, in giving us interviews, in giving us counterfacts if they feel that the facts that we've published are not right. Instead of taking us to court and filing complaints and making us face charges that could include imprisonment. Egypt does not need more journalists imprisoned at this point.
Right. So what you're regretting is that it was essentially a political response rather than a legal one.
What I'm regretting is that it's a response that is coming in an environment that does not recognize the importance of a free flow of information. We publish information that we've verified properly. It bothers some authorities. They need to respond to us, and we're open to hearing the responses and to printing the responses. But what we are not open for is being taken to court like that.
Right. I mean, is this a form of blackmail, if I may use the expression? They're putting those charges out. You don't know what's going to happen with the case because they want to see how you behave, essentially.
Of course, I'm worried about the fate of the case, about the fate of myself and my colleagues. So I don't know if I should call it blackmail, but certainly they are succeeding in making us worry.
Right, because there are other cases, especially you're also accused by the authorities of operating your website without a formal media license. I know you're challenging this in court as well. Can you explain the situation there?
So in 2018, Egypt passed a media law that basically requests a licensing process in order to regulate the media environment. We have been open from the beginning to take part in this regulation exercise, even though we have reservations about, the thin lines between regulation and censorship. So we really tried hard to acquire a license ever since the law was passed in 2018, except that we did not get any response, only to come to know during the interrogations that actually our request for licensing has been rejected by the authorities. So basically, we are using our legal right to contest a decision that is an executive decision, which is a very common thing in law. And Egypt is a country that has a very strong legal tradition. So we would like to believe that this strong legal tradition is still here and is still here to support us in our right to organize ourselves properly under Egyptian law as a media organization.
Right, because to be blunt, this means that the Egyptian authorities could any day come tell you don't have a license, you have to shut down your media outlet.
It depends on what the court does and says in the end.
Right. But do you fear that this might indeed be the scenario, or do you think that the authorities will maybe not dare go that far?
I'm worried, but I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm. What is the situation of the media in Egypt? I mean, we know, according to Reporters Without Borders, other Amnesty and so on, that there are a number of media outlets that were forced to shut down. There are a number, at least 23 journalists behind bar. How would you describe the media situation in your country right now?
Well, it hasn't been easy to do this job while insisting on doing it independently and, without doing any negotiations with anyone in a power position, because our role is obviously, and as the classic journalism learning is just basically holding those into account. So it has been very hard for us to do this job in terms of accessing the information, in terms of printing it without facing some repercussions if the content is not to the liking of some. We are also increasingly seeing the environment shrink, and very few of us out there doing that job as independent journalists, and it gets really. We feel really lonely when we feel that there is no community of practice around us trying to defend journalism as a canon of freedom in terms of also how information is produced and spread. And we find it disheartening because we feel that the Egyptian people deserve free and quality journalism, which we've been wrestling to offer it. And we hope that we can continue doing that. And we hope that the authorities recognize and acknowledge the importance of this canon for them and for the Egyptian people.
You spoke about feeling lonely. Do you also feel lonely because many Western countries are maybe not forceful enough in calling for more press freedom in Egypt, more freedom in general? We know, according to human rights group, that there are tens of thousands of so-called political prisoners, and that the West is not daring to speak to President Sisi because they might need him for stability or other geopolitical or economic reasons.
The question of human rights and media freedoms and freedom of expression is only a fragment in a complex web of relations between the West and our country. So I never take it for granted that it will prevail as the prime issue, for example, within this web. These are complex political relations based on mutual interests, and we understand that there are values of human rights and media freedoms that are upheld by certain Western governments, and it's out of upholding these values that they can be vocal about the state of human rights in our country. But I also have no qualms that it's only a fragment of in a complex web of relations. The Egyptian authorities, opting to have an agenda that is rights-oriented or even rights-centric one day will have to be based on their own will and conviction that this is good for them and good for their people.
Right, but let's just take the example. COP27 was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. There was a lot of pressure on Western dignitaries, other dignitaries as well, to speak out on the issue of human rights. Some of them spoke, but essentially going through the motions, if I may use the expression. They left the COP and not much has happened. So this is actually the example that in this complex web, human rights, media rights do not weigh a lot.
Maybe at this point they don't weigh a lot.
But you think that there is still a willingness by Western countries or others to push for you to be able to be a journalist as you dream of being a journalist?
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's an absent fragment. I think it's very much a present fragment. It's just a question of when it comes in, under what circumstances, and with what kind of exchanges. So I'm not saying that it does not exist. It exists. But what I'm also saying is that what matters primarily is that through and without this support, the Egyptian authorities need to build their own homegrown conviction that human rights matter, that people's rights matter. It's important most of all for them and for their people, more than anything else.
Right. Just as a last question, more personally, obviously those have been difficult times for you, but are you still eager to be a journalist in Egypt now, maybe more than ever?
Very much so. I love this job. I think journalism is a fascinating vehicle through which we can talk about society, about the political situation, about how we are navigating crisis. It's a fascinating opportunity to open a space for conversation at a time where we direly need intelligent conversation, especially in moments of crisis. So I have every vested interest to keep doing the job and to keep having Mada do the job with its fantastic team of reporters and editors. And I always say that our presence is much better for Egypt than our absence.
Lina Atallah, I want to thank you very much for appearing on the France 24 interview. Thank you all for watching it, and stay tuned for more news.